Well, good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to have you all here this morning. Thank you for getting up so bright and early. This is the first time we've done a morning event, and I think brownies and tea definitely make it. So, thank you for joining us. For those of you I've not met, I'm Francesca Oakham-White, and I'm the founder of the Beauty Triangle. Now, we're here this morning to discuss menopause management because, menopause is a period of life which sees women go through such extraordinary physical change, yet I think one of the things that goes so often unspoken is the loss of identity that often women feel at this period of time. Luckily we're joined today by some incredible experts. And I think our sort of raison d'etre with the Beauty Triangle was always to educate and empower our audiences on all aspects of their health and well-being, and always from a holistic standpoint. But it was also to introduce audiences such as yourselves to the very best practitioners in the world of wellness. So on that note, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's amazing speakers, starting with GP and hormone expert, Dr. Sohère Roked, aesthetic doctor and body expert, Dr. Galyna Selezneva, and Cloud 12's own founder, Jenya Di Pierro, who is also a herbalist, naturopath, and homeopath. I think if I got that correct. And so really, we're all here this morning to talk about treatments and therapies that can help us to overcome menopausal symptoms, but also to help us gain control again in a period where we feel like we're going through so much flux. So we're going to be talking about hormonal rejuvenation, we're going to be talking about female treatments, and we're also going to be talking about the power of herbal medicine. A few things just before we get started. Hopefully you all have found some programs on your tables. They have referral cards on the back, so if you hear anyone here that you'd like to speak with after the event, if you'd like us to connect you, just leave your details on those and we will introduce you following the event. We'll have an audience Q&A at the very end, so please save any questions you have until then. And we have an amazing goodie bag for you as well, which Jenya has kindly provided some gorgeous, is it teas and tinctures?
Yeah, so it's a tea and a tincture to support menopausal symptoms.
Perfect, and we also have some really gorgeous skincare in there from MV Skin Therapy. That's enough from myself. I'm going to hand over to our amazing speakers. They're going to say a quick hello and then we'll get started with the conversation. So, Dr. Roked, over to you.
Hi, so I'm Dr. Sohère Roked. I'm a GP and I specialise in hormones, mainly perimenopause and menopause, but I also do see people with period problems, some fertility issues, and also some men's health as well. My approach to health is very much with the integrative health model and functional medicine. So, of course, a lot of people come to see me because they're in menopause, they're having bad symptoms, and we can definitely look at hormone balancing, of course. But I think it's also important to look at the whole person, what else is going on, be that emotionally, physically, and other aspects of your health as well. So to really provide that holistic overview for health.
Thank you, Sohère. That was amazing. Over to Dr. Galyna.
Well, I'm actually thinking, what do I say? So I'm an aesthetic doctor, but I think aesthetic medicine has moved on so dramatically from looking good to feeling good and being good. So I think my idea, I probably was the first one to keep saying vaginal rejuvenation on stage very loudly, and I still do. Functional medicine is also part of aesthetic medicine. And whether it makes you feel good about yourself, whether you're perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal, or actually young and getting ready for it. So let's not forget prevention as well. So that's probably my philosophy.
Thank you, Dr. Galyna. And Jenya.
So I'm Jenya Di Pierro. I'm founder of Cloud 12. I'm also a herbalist and naturopath, and I practice in the realm of functional medicine as well. For those of you who are here for the first time, just a few words about Cloud 12. It's a wellness and lifestyle club. We've got spa, salon, brasserie, wellness clinic that kind of practices along various alternative medicine modalities, from herbal to nutrition, acupuncture, craniosacral, colonic irrigation, and so on. And then we have a kids club downstairs for families with little kids. And everything we do is about wellness, whether it's mental, emotional, physical, but also social wellness. Hence we have events like this, where beautiful ladies come together. We speak about exciting either beauty or wellness topics. You can meet like-minded people, have fun, learn new things. And of course, the Kids Club also allows us to have this social aspect of wellness, which is sometimes the most critical factor for good health. And so my personal passion is hormonal health, although I also practice in gut health and skin health as well. But I'm myself approaching perimenopause, so it's very much aligned with my own goals and interests. And as often happens, when your interests align, you kind of start attracting patients as well
So true.
with similar problems, and you know, that segment just has grown massively for me in the last few years.
Thank you so much, Jenya. And I love what you said about social wellness. I think that's exactly what events like this are all about, you know, bringing people together. And we certainly had our sort of own shot at doing webinars over lockdown, but I must say it's so nice to have everyone back in person now, because that's definitely a huge part of social well-being for me. So on with the conversation, starting with Dr. Sohère Roked. Sohère has obviously introduced herself. She's a hormone specialist, obviously sort of dealing with perimenopause, menopause, and everything sort of pertaining to our overall health. But maybe, Sohère, you can start by explaining why the majority of women find their way to your door.
So most people come to see me because they aren't sure what's going on in their system. Perhaps they've also sought other medical advice and they haven't quite got the answers they want. And most people I see want to understand what's happening. They don't necessarily just want to go see the GP and get given a gel and a pill. They actually want to know what's going on, what's happening, what can I do? And if I need to take hormones, yeah, that's great as well. But it's very much a tricky time of life. You know, things can be going really well with your career and your family, and then all of a sudden something just isn't right and you're not sure what it is, and something feels out of balance. And it's not always hot flushes that bring people to my door. It's often lack of sleep, not being able to function as well in their career, brain fog, noticing they're more snappy with the people in their lives, so kids, partners, friends, and then just feeling really isolated with it all, so not wanting to go out on a Friday night, but also not wanting to explain to people why, because there still feels a stigma around it, and they don't fully understand why they don't want to go out either. And people often say I feel very unmotivated to do anything. I will get the kids to school and I will drag myself to work, but if there's anything other than that, I can't do it. So it's really that lack of quality of life. And I really just don't think it's something we need to put up with anymore in our 40s and our 50s. Sometimes it's a little bit earlier, but it is generally women I see in their 40s and 50s who just really feel like they're just existing, not living anymore.
Oh, that's such a sad thing to say, existing and not living. I mean, so that obviously sort of suggests that it's the more emotional sort of symptoms of the menopause that are bothering people more than the physical symptoms.
Yeah, I think if there's something physical going on, you feel a bit hot, you could probably get on with it if you felt really well in yourself and you felt really upbeat and you were getting everything else done. But when you're not really having that quality of life, I think especially these days we're just even more aware of what's out there now compared to probably our mothers, who I think my mother probably did suffer in silence, you know, just got on with things.
There's certainly much sort of greater education, but also, like you said, there's less stigma around,
Yeah,
I think, talking about our
definitely.
hormones now and sort of what we're going through.
And I think that's a great thing. It's on the telly, Davina's always talking about hormones. There's lots of stuff on social media. And I think it's all a really, really good thing because it's opening up the conversation. And even if you yourself aren't struggling with your symptoms, perhaps you've noticed a friend who is, and you could reach out and help them. And I think it's, again, about women supporting other women, which I think is really important.
That's so true. I think you've just touched on something really important. It's not just yourself.
Yeah.
It's, you know, who else could your menopause or those sort of hormonal imbalances, who could that be affecting as well?
Definitely.
Tell us a little bit about sort of perimenopause and menopause, because we're obviously sort of much more sort of I suppose, well versed with the term perimenopause now, but what exactly is the difference between those two stages?
So menopause is generally when your periods have stopped, and you're through menopause when you haven't had a period for 12 months. But the time before that is normally far more tricky, and that's the perimenopause. And up until very recently, GPs used to tell people, I can't really do anything for you until your periods stop. But that time when your periods are irregular or things are going a bit astray, that's the worst bit. It's like once your periods have stopped, it's far easier to manage that. But when you're having a period 1 month, you're not having one for a couple of months, you're feeling irritable and you don't know why. 1 minute you're hot, next minute you're not hot. That's the bit that's far trickier to manage. So
I suppose it's the unpredictability of it as much as anything else, yes.
Yeah, so people come to see me because I've been treating perimenopause for 10 years. I haven't had a problem treating it. And when people come to see me, I say, look, we don't want to stop your periods. We don't want to stop your body doing what it's doing naturally. We just want to make it easier for you to go through. So we want that transition to be a lot easier and a lot less troublesome. And I think it starts with monitoring what's going on for you, because my symptoms could be very different to your symptoms or your symptoms. And we need to maybe keep a bit more of a record of what's going on, not just with the periods, but how we feel throughout the month.
So like a daily diary, sort of actually logging all of the symptoms, your emotional state, things like that.
And I think the key areas is sleep, mood, brain fog, hot flushes, the bloating as well, that's a major one, and skin changes as well. And I think if you keep a bit of a log of what's going on, you may be able to see a pattern, and then I love it when someone comes in and go, look, I've got all the data, this is what's going on this month, and then something happens this month.
Such
I'm
a
like,
scientist.
I'm like, this is brilliant, this is great, because I'm not with them all month, you know, I'm with them for half an hour or 45 minutes, so I find that really helpful. And I always think it's about you becoming the expert on you. I think in medicine, we're moving away from the whole, hey, I'm the doctor, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're going to listen to me.
I think definitely with your hormones as well. And I think you're so right with what you say about logging, because how often have you been to a doctor and they say, when did you last feel like that? And you go, oh, I can't really remember.
Yeah.
Was it a week ago? Was it 2 weeks ago? And sometimes you see these things written down and you go, my goodness, there's a real pattern emerging there.
Yeah.
So you're obviously a specialist in bioidentical hormones.
Yeah.
So can you explain a little bit about how that practice helps bring the body back into balance?
Yeah, so I think the good thing in general is that everybody's moving away from synthetic hormones, which are basically drugs with some hormonal properties. And most GPs these days prescribe body identical hormones, which I do as well, which is maybe estrogen gels, patches, progesterone tablets, and they have the same chemical structure as the hormones your body is producing or was producing. So you can metabolize them better, and your body knows how to process it a lot better. So there's less side effects, less risks in general. Bioidentical is when they're custom made. So an example of this, which I commonly use, is testosterone. Testosterone is a really important hormone for women, which isn't that commonly prescribed, but again, hopefully things are changing. Our ovaries stop making 3 hormones in menopause: progesterone, estrogen, and testosterone. So I'm not sure why we're only replacing 2. The testosterone is really important for things like focus, concentration, motivation, building muscle, burning fat, and just feeling, having a bit of zhuzh about you, that's always good, I think. So
I was going to say, is the testosterone not available as a body identical
yeah,
hormone?
so it's only available from UK and European drug companies in man's doses.
Which you evidently would not want to be taking.
Well, I would want to be. I don't need a testosterone.
What would those side effects be?
Yeah, like 50 times higher
Too much
than what
fun.
I need to. You can get aggression, acne, hair loss in extreme cases and things like that. So
you definitely want the bioidentical
it's quite
version.
often I customise it in a female dose. And the other thing is, some patients I see their GP and they get given hormones, but they can't tolerate the dosage, and then there's no scope to change it in any way. So we can get it custom made into a dosage that suits you.
So when you say custom made, who's making that? How are you sort of finding these amazing sort of ingredients and putting them together?
So there are a few pharmacies in the UK that custom make hormones. They have all the same regulations as normal pharmacies with the General Pharmaceutical Council and things like that. They're proper laboratories. They're not made in someone's bedroom or something like that, proper labs. And they can custom make things in different forms or doses to suit your system. And another important aspect of that is the monitoring, of course. If you're going to take something like that, you want to see someone who's got experience in prescribing it and also knows how to monitor it and how to interpret levels and things like that if we do it.
And so people obviously come to your door, they have the blood test that sort of picks up on any imbalance, and then you prescribe the bioidentical hormones. How often are they sort of coming back to you to have that monitored? What does that journey look like for somebody?
So once someone is stable, I see them every 6 months. One can be virtual, because we've all got used to that now. And then once a year, normally do some testing as well, just to make sure everything's good. Also looking at other female screening, so smears, mammograms, scans of the womb and ovaries, it's about, well-being in general, not just, I want someone to feel great, obviously, but I also want to make sure that their health is good. And I think that's important. We also pick up on any other little things. Of course, if someone's GP is willing to do some of the testing, I'm always really open to that as well. I just want the person who I'm seeing to feel better.
And how long is the average woman sort of staying on HRT for? How long should we be on it for? Do we sort of end when the menopause has come to a sort of nice clean halt, or do we go on from there?
So the official guidelines up until very recently said you could take HRT for 5 years or up until you were 55. And I used to see a lot of women over that age who wanted to stay on it. And of course, if we were monitoring things, then I was very happy to do that if all the tests were coming back clear. The good news is the guidelines have now changed. And if you start HRT at the right time, you can continue it. And, you know, I'd often see patients go, well, you know, my grandma took it up until she was in her 70s and she was very well and healthy. And now the evidence is showing that that's actually correct. And if you started at the right time, it's preventative for things like dementias, osteoporosis, heart disease. So if someone's feeling well on HRT and they want to stay on it, they're more than welcome to.
And this totally goes back, and I'm sure Dr. Galyna will sort of elaborate further on this, but that whole idea of, you know, the treatments that we're doing today are not just for the here and the now, they are for the future as well. They're for the benefit of our future self.
Yeah, and I think that's also very important to look at. Like, you know, it's not just, oh, I don't want hot flushes. It's like, I want improved bone density. I want my heart health to be good. You know, women have a very low rate of heart attacks up until after menopause. And then they overtake men in the heart attacks. Same with dementias. A lot of the dementia we're seeing in women, we believe now, and neurological disorders, not just dementia, it's been due to the lack of estrogen that women have been getting to the brain. Because we've got receptors all over our body for estrogen. You know, it's not just about flushes, it's in your heart, it's in your bones, it's in your brain. So it's just good preventative health in general.
And I think we're definitely seeing this as a trend in general aesthetics. You know, a lot of things that we started out doing because we thought they would sort of address the aesthetic causes, or, you know, maybe the sort of light physical symptoms, really do have their roots in sort of longer term overall health. So I think it's really, really critical. You also do other things. You look at gut health, you look at sleep quality, stress levels. You mentioned a few of these things earlier. How do those sort of fit into the bigger picture when it comes to hormones? Why do you have to look at that bigger picture?
So I think hormones is very important, obviously, but it's just one part of the story. And if all we do is pump you full of more and more hormones, it's going to start causing other issues. So sometimes there comes a time where someone's saying, well, you know, I don't feel as good as I used to. Check the levels are looking great. And it's like, well, look, you know, your body is a huge system. What else is going on? Could it be your stress? What's going on with your gut health? You know, is there other things going on emotionally, spiritually? You know, really looking at the person as a whole and trying to get things. So I try and do yearly sort of MOT bloods on people as well, but we can always do a deeper dive onto things like gut health, or looking at vitamin and mineral testing, maybe seeing what's going on with the stress hormone, because that's a key area. If, say, someone's got an issue with sleep, we can do things with like sleep tracking and look at different supplements or herbal things, and, you know, what else we can bring in. So it's not just hormones, it's like looking at someone as a whole.
I suppose you always have to have that investigative sort of, you know, detective hat on as a doctor, don't you?
I know, because I'm a GP and that's my background, that, you know, you look at a bit of hopefully look at a bit of everything and try and figure out what's going on. So I still bring that into my hormone practice now.
It's a brilliant idea, and I think it's exactly the way that we should be prescribing hormones today. Thank you so much, Sohère. That was really, really enlightening. So thank you for joining us this morning. Our next speaker is Dr. Galyna Selezneva, who
I'm still with
is
you. I'm
back
still
with
thinking
us.
of what you said. Sorry.
She's like engrossed in the subject of hormones, obviously. But Galyna is an aesthetic doctor. She's an absolute expert when it comes to shaping and strengthening the body. She has a device and a machine and a modality to tackle every sort of concern,
True.
I would say. But Galyna, maybe you can start by explaining to us sort of why, I suppose, what are the physical sort of things that concern the menopausal patients that maybe you see in your clinic?
First of all, I'm a psychiatrist in the past. I've spent 10 years in psychiatry before I moved on into aesthetic medicine. And it was very interesting, just to link it to Dr. Sohère's talk. When patients come to me, they're already trying to take control of their body. When they come to the aesthetic world, they have realized that they've tried themselves. I don't see those who haven't, that they've tried themselves and now they need a bit of help. So that element of control that you were talking about, and that element of a holistic experience, that's when I see my patients for the physical representation of everything that you spoke about. And from a physicality, it's so incredibly linked to the power of our mind.
That's so true.
And I see patients in perimenopausal period, which actually starts as young as 35 It's not 45, it's 35, and sometimes 30 if you have early menopause in your history. Unfortunately, you're just thinking, you're a young girl, you're 35, you vibe it, and then suddenly your hormones will be reminding you that you are starting to go into perimenopausal period. And you're absolutely right. You can't pinpoint that. It's just a whole creation of multimodal. Let's yes, please. Come on in, find a spot.
Sorry, we still got a few spots.
From a physical perspective, it's that dreaded, I can't fit my jeans, because it sits on the mid-body.
Is that hormonal belt that we all
It is hormonal belt. There is another terrible word which I hate, midriff. I'm not English, so I couldn't understand the word.
I feel like that's quite outdated, that word now.
It's still being used in publications. It's still being used. I hate it, but it is the hormonal belt. Just imagine your lower abdomen and imagine your flanks, and then out of nowhere, even if you never had them before, you're starting to accumulate. And there are multiple reasons for that. So if I talk a little bit about the anatomy, cortisol is an incredibly important hormone, even before we talk about estrogen and testosterone, and somehow shoots up during the perimenopause and menopause.
Cortisol does, it sort of escalates.
Yes, absolutely, and that is not very helpful when it comes to weight gain. Hormonal weight gain is actually a thing. It's not just a scary term that some papers are using against us. It is actually a thing that is explained by your physiology. Estrogen is a good hormone to have. I'm just trying to gather my thoughts. But
do you see a lot of women coming in with that sort of hormonal sort of accumulation of weight? Are they
absolutely
bothered by it, or
absolutely.
Is it something that we can?
It's not only they're bothered by that. They never had it before, so it's such a new thing for them. At the age of 40, 45, they're suddenly developing cushions and little pillows on their body, and they're like, what is that? But what's happening, your muscle goes down. The density of your muscle bulk is going down. The volume of the muscle is going down, actually 8% per decade. So if you've come to me at about 50 plus, you have already naturally, even if you exercise, lost about 8% of your muscle volume. That's why I'm talking about functional treatments.
And when you lose the muscle mass as well, it makes it sort of harder to burn calories and...
Well, muscles are metabolically active. They actually are a massive part of your metabolism. So if you have less muscle volume of the muscle, your metabolism slows down as well. Fat is almost metabolically inactive. It's a very lazy substance. It actually, it does nothing. It's very light, so even if you put on quite a bit circumferentially, you most probably won't notice it on the scales. Muscle is quite bulky and heavy, so even if you are losing muscle bulk, you think, oh, I've lost some weight, and you get quite excited. Actually, that is wrong. You probably have gained. So your body disposition has changed, and you probably gained the volume of fat cells, subcutaneous and visceral subfat,
and that's a dangerous sort of part of the body to be accumulating fat on as well.
And that's one of the reasons why Dr. Sohère was talking about the risk of cardiovascular disease for women, is because of that hormonal belt is usually accumulating on the circumference of the waist, which is directly linked to the higher risk of cardiovascular disease. And that's, you're absolutely right, women have incredibly high level of risk when it comes to heart disease. But it's also that inability to control what you eat. We are going into negative equations. If you out of 1,000 calories used to, let's say you've eaten 1,000 calories and 700 calories was metabolized just by everyday activity, and let's say 300 calories would kind of go and sit on your hip. Okay, well, we can deal with that, right? The equation changes dramatically. It is now 700 calories that sit on your body and 300 calories get metabolized. So we go into almost negative equation. That's why, and nobody talks about it. Nobody talks that from 2,000, what is it, 2,500 calories that is a recommended daily dose. It's for a young woman. I'm a young woman, actually. Forget the term young. It's for 20s, For 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you have to minus.
You're so right, nobody ever does say
Nobody
that.
ever talks about it because we no longer metabolize what we eat in the same way. That just doesn't happen. I was talking to a lovely nutritionist from my perspective. I had a progesterone spike last year. I put on 8 kilos in 1 month, which was water retention, absolute kind of like explosion of hormones in my body. Nobody ever mentioned to me, oh, you know, that's normal, this is what's happening. And I saw 3 endocrinologists.
Right.
So even from
You
a
need to see
medical...
Sohère.
No, but it's true, you do need to see a hormone specialist, or
It's so
at
true.
least somebody who understands it.
Can I ask, because you have devices obviously to tackle that midsection, and I'm sure you can sort of tell us about those later, but do you have to wait for a woman maybe to be on HRT, to be managing that sort of menopausal weight, or can you go in there with the machines?
There will be women who will never be able to go on HRT due to side effects and who would only be with this power of plants and naturopathy. So we cannot wait for the magic HRT we have to act.
You can sort of intervene and manage that imbalance.
Absolutely,
through
and we need
technology.
to start with healthy lifestyle, hate the word, but we have to start with that. There should be changes done to what you are consuming calorifically, even just if you go by numbers. There should be more activities, not only because, and activities are different, they should be more targeted to your stamina, your cardiovascular system, and the
To keep your
growth
heart
of
healthy.
the growth of your muscle. You should potentially invest into a personal trainer who understands what a woman after 35, not 45, after 35, go into prevention again. Same as with diabetes, same as with cardiovascular disease. What you want to do, we just called it a wave. You just have to ride a wave, and you have to learn how your body, what your body is facing. So almost self-awareness is key here.
And doing that little bit yourself as well, doing your homework at home and making sure that you are, doing everything that you can before a patient finds their way to your door, and then you can pick up with your specialism.
Absolutely. And then you can just say, okay, let's press the button, and the device will work. But the device will work. That's the good thing. The device will work if you're working also. Because I'm not going to do all the work. The electricity and the plug-in device is not going to do the work itself.
So what's your number one, if we're talking about this hormonal sort of belt, this midsection that's sort of accumulated?
Oh, I love it. So we have, this is where I start getting very excited. First of all, let's divide the body contouring when it comes to menopause and hormones and uncontrollable, let's put it this way, uncontrollable changes to your body. We have to address the subcutaneous layer of fat, we have to address the skin, and we have to address the muscle. Because there are changes in all 3. We cannot just freeze the fat and leave the muscle unattended. We cannot just do a bit of skin tightening and leave the subcutaneous fat unattended. All 3 have to be in, you have to address all 3 of them. The good news is that the technology, it's an incredibly diverse industry. And luckily for us, the end of the consumers, people have invested a lot of money, billions and billions into the industry. So the technology works and it is advanced. So we have, for example, Delio, which is a new beautiful French company that does Crystal Pro, which is the body layering concept. So we're addressing the skin. You can do radio frequency tightening of the skin. You can then do cryolipolysis for the fat cells. And then you can do the toning of the muscle as well. And that can be done.
So it has the muscle stimulation in there as well.
Exactly,
Wow.
exactly. And it's the safest way. Before you say what happened to Linda, without going into details, we have moved on from something like cool sculpting quite a few years ago. So we are, even before Linda cases, so every year the technology is becoming safer, the technology is less painful, and is more effective.
How long does it take to do something like the crystal Delio sort of treatment?
Oh God, it's a half-an-hour treatment. I mean, there is no excuse. I love it.
Half an hour to do all of those 3, or to focus on one area?
If you do all the 3, you probably want to allocate about 45 minutes to an hour to do all 3. Again, everything is specific. I am incredibly personalization is key. So you have to personalize your treatment plan. So I'm seeing different faces here. I'm seeing different bodies. The same is with different treatment plans. Each and every one will have a different plan, which I think applies both to hormones and both to naturopathy.
It's
same
all about
comes
the
to
bespoke
technology.
approach.
Exactly.
And I can lay testament to that, having laid on your treatment table before. You are incredibly OCD about how you
I
position
am slightly
applicators.
OCD. I think my
and you have all
passion
the
comes
tricks.
a bit, you know, I'm probably my mind moves a bit faster as
You
well
found your
than my
calling.
words. But I do love it. Then we have BTL range, and that is the EM Sculpt Neo, this is the EM Seller, this is the Ultra Femme, and this is one of the probably most reputable company to work with at the moment, and it addresses, again, the aspects of female life. Abdominal recti, which is the muscle that is your core muscle, continues into your pelvic floor muscle, and I love talking about vaginal rejuvenation.
That was going to be my next question.
Oh
We can
my
get away
God!
without asking.
I don't think I've done a single talk without mentioning vaginal rejuvenation.
Because you've got the M Zeller, which is
We have
a
the
chair
M Zeller,
which
it is-
tones the pelvic floor.
Yes, high intensity magnetic energy will make your pelvic floor exercise and contract for the period of 30 minutes, and that would be an equivalent of 11,000 Kegel exercises. I mean, I've probably done 10 in my life.
I don't think I even did that.
I have tried. Can you imagine 11,000 Kegel exercise?
And so is this something that menopausal or perimenopausal patients complain about, sort of pelvic floor weakness?
Muscle wasting.
Yeah.
Muscle wasting occurs everywhere in the same way it occurs in your biceps. Actually less, because biceps is your everyday muscle. You use it for your daily activities.
Mm-hmm.
You don't use it daily. Even if you try, you don't use it monthly. I'm so sorry to say. But even if you sit there and say, okay, I've read in a magazine, I have to do that. Yeah? And you sit and you concentrate, and there you are for 2 minutes. I can do it. And then, oh yeah, what did I pick up my kids from school? Oh no, maybe I should do that. Oh, what's on social media? You don't concentrate for those 10 minutes daily oh my God. So just sit on the chair. You don't even have to get undressed. But women sometimes tell me, and this what gets me quite, and you know how I get when I get a bit annoyed. Oh no, I had C-section, it's fine. Forget about that. It's carrying the baby.
It's the
if
weight
you
on
have
your
had the
pelvic floor.
baby, it's the weight of the baby, the water, the placenta, the womb. Oh, your life, your husband, everything sits on your pelvic floor. So even if you're considering one muscle, and please, every single patient can come and trial, every single person here can come and trial at Dr. Rake's clinic for free as a part of the goodie bag. Even if you're going to do one thing for your muscles, from now till the end of your life is your pelvic floor strength.
But because if you don't maintain that strength,
You
then
will.
will sort of end up with urinary
You
incontinence and
You will end up with urinary incontinence.
Yeah.
The question is, what age?
yeah.
The fact that you will end up with that, I don't think I'm going to ask a very medical doctor. You will.
Yeah. And tell us about the
It's
other.
going to happen.
Tell us about the other female rejuvenation device, which is the Ultra Femme 360.
Ultra Femme 360.
Where does that fit into sort of the menopause?
Inside you.
That was a great answer. Couldn't have
So
phrased
it
that
is
one better
actually
myself.
internal and external rejuvenation. Again, it's a very safe device, and I've been doing it for about 7 years now. Feminine rejuvenation.
I think you were one of the first to use it.
I
weren't
was
you?
the one of the first one to actually get into the area, and I have used multiple devices, and I don't use lasers only because the risk profile is a bit higher than radio frequency, so I have found the most effective and safest device. And when I say it fits right inside you, it does. It's actually goes internally to stimulate collagen. The word vaginal atrophy is actually a medical diagnosis. In reality, that is pain in intercourse, that is dryness when you wear knickers, that is inability to lubricate when you're wanting to have sexual relationship with, well, anyone. Yeah, not necessarily. Obviously, I can't change your mental stimulation, but I can change your lubrication. So in the same way as you lose collagen on your face, you will be losing collagen inside your vagina. And outside, thinning of the labia is a thing. You will lose fat in the same fat pads on your lips in the same way you would lose them on your face. You will gain them on your flanks. You will lose them on your
that
vaginal.
That is a very
lips.
unfair redistribution.
I am really sorry, but that will happen. So, and I have a lovely patient in her mid-70s. She travels to me once every 3 months to maintain her vaginal health because she's very sexually active. And she says, you help me wear my jeans because it will, at a certain age, become a problem, the thinning of the lips. So we can prevent that. So that's, God.
So speaking of
again, vaginal rejuvenation. I can't just avoid the topic. I'm drawn to it.
I mean, you're a specialist. What more can I say? So you spoke about collagen in the vagina, but collagen on the face, collagen in the skin elsewhere. Do you see menopause having an effect on our skin quality? The
Absolutely.
thickness, the quality of it, sort of on our faces.
I think one of the first complaints that anyone after 30 would bring to an aesthetic world is my skin feels dry. The hydration of the skin, the dreadful crepiness, which is a concentration of fine lines and wrinkles. That when we feel, I just look dull. My skin
what's
looks
causing
dull.
this?
Estrogen. The dreaded estrogen. I'm afraid there will be changes in your hormones. Now, what they have looked into now is in-depth knowledge of aging. So what we have in an aesthetic medicine is the concentration of all that research that's gone into the aging, and it's far beyond fillers and Botox. We understand now that even bone structure is changing. Your ligaments is changing. That's also collagen. Collagen is not only how good my skin looks, it's your ligaments. Not only is it ligaments that run in your joints, but it's the ones that surround your organs. There's so much more to the world of collagen when it comes to your body. So if you can find a good supplement, please take it, and it has to be approved. It has to be a medical supplement, not a kind of beauty. You either go into naturopathy or you go into approved medicine. So I'm not very beauty pro. I like my stuff, and when it comes to devices, just kind of a final touch. It's not going to replace your healthy lifestyle. It's not going to replace you going to the gym, but it's going to help you dramatically. Because you still, as a human being, you still have the cells called fibroblasts, and they are friends, and we can still stimulate them into production of elastin and collagen. So use modern technology in the same way as you use your mobile phone. You don't send fax machines, do you? You don't use fax. So you have the technology, use it. And aesthetic medicine nowadays goes far beyond.
Can I ask a final question? Do you still see menopausal patients coming to your door struggling with the concept of menopause? Or do you think that because of conversations maybe like this, maybe because of your personality, is it becoming less of a stigma for them?
I 100% think these events are, mentality is changing. At least we are now aware of menopause and perimenopause. We still don't know what to do with it. So we're in very early days. This is the prehistoric of menopause. We're still in very early days. And the lucky ones who got into the good hands of doctor, who got into the good hands of naturopath before it kicked in fully, before the hot flashes, those are the lucky ones. The majority, I still see patients and they sit down like, I don't know why, but I don't know why this has just started growing in my lower abdomen. Or the question is, no matter what I do, I can't get rid of my lower tummy. Well, I know why you're doing it. Why you're struggling. It is started, one of the first symptoms of the menopause is weight gain.
It's a nice point as well what you've made. People do have different paths when it comes to managing menopause as well. Whether it is the natural medicine, whether it is sort of the HRT, whether it is just plugging yourself into a machine.
100%, but I'm going to say something which I think, and I do apologize to the man in the room, who's going to make us feel all very nice. Men also have menopause. It's called andropause. It's happening. So it's not only us, it is also men. I remind my husband of it every single day.
And the beauty of that is that the men can come to see you, they can see Sohère, and I'm sure they see Jenya as well. Yeah. So, and again, to keep sort of relationships strong in the long term, maybe it is something for both of you to address. It can't just be the woman addressing her sort of hormones. If if the man is also going through andropause. Thank you. That was a really interesting return. I think we need a whole other sort of talk to discuss the andropause now.
I'm thinking so.
Yes, exactly. You can be there. Jenya, our final speaker, thank you so much for hosting us today at Cloud 12. Jenya is, she explained, homeopath, naturopath, herbalist. I think she's also probably a real sort of sounding board for a lot of the patients who come to see her, particularly when they're going through sort of menopausal flux. Jenya, maybe you can sort of start by telling us whether, are you seeing sort of a rise in patients coming to your door with menopausal symptoms? Is it something that you think more of us are sort of seeking help for nowadays?
Yes, obviously it's a topic that's discussed more and more, so I think many more people are willing to share the information. Also, many more people are willing to look at the natural medicine. I think there's a real trend when we realize that drugs are not always helpful with something chronic, and also quite often once you're on one drug, you're on lots of other drugs that start kind of interacting with each other. So I've got patients that I kind of need to untangle everything that they're on.
Yes.
To give you an example of antidepressants, SSRIs, they suppress testosterone and libido.
Yeah.
So that's not a very good drug to be on when you're going into menopause. And so, this compounding effect of medication, and also just the understanding of the power of naturopathy, actually, in some way thanks to COVID.
Yeah, really? Is that when you saw a bit of a spike in it? People sort of seeking natural alternatives?
Yeah, very much so, because there's no medical solution really for prevention. There's no medical solution really for long COVID, let's say. So there are no medical solutions for some of these issues, and that's why people are looking for other ways of maintaining their well-being.
Yeah. And what are the key symptoms when it does come to the menopausal patient that they're coming to you with? What are they complaining from?
So if I can start with perimenopause, because that's kind of very much linked to menopause. And as we mentioned, it kind of starts around 45. So I'm perimenopausal, and I can kind of almost describe my own experience as well as my patients. So I believe that the period from 45 to 55 is the most important period in your life when you need to invest in your health. And this is because, we all have some genetic SNPs, we will have some imbalances. And when we're young, we have the way to offset it, we have the way to deal with it. When we approach perimenopause, menopause, they kind of start falling off the cliff because you don't have the body vitality to carry you through these issues. And therefore, the more you invest in your well-being, diet, lifestyle, herb supplement, the healthier you'll be on the other side. And I know we've spoken about a lot of kind of uncomfortable symptoms, and menopause being this super challenging transition, quite tough to go through, but also, and it is true, our body is weaker, we are recalibrating in a ways compared to kind of second puberty, when we have a massive change in hormones, when we also need to make some very key decisions for the rest of our lives that will affect us, and likewise, your food choices, your supplement choices, they will affect you more than ever in your life during this 45 to 55 period. And so, but I have already seen women who have come out on the other side. And I tell you, they're beautiful. They're empowered. They're matriarchs who are in charge of their own destiny. Post-menopause is the time when you actually can put yourself first. You can prioritize. You can rediscover who you are as a woman. It's an incredibly beautiful period. You just have to kind of be brave and bear through this. And, I'm not absolutely against hormonal therapies. I think they're absolutely necessary for women. Like an example of vaginal atrophy, when it's really severe, women can't even sit, they can't even walk, and drop in estrogen, as we discussed, poses risk for osteoporosis, and also glucose management becomes very, very tricky. So people predisposed to diabetes, predisposed to osteoporosis, there's very much, a case for hormone replacement therapy. However, if the kind of woman I was describing, matriarch, this is the woman that is intuitive with her body, and to an extent drugs suppress a lot, they do suppress our kind of natural functioning of the body. So this is a little bit misaligned with this very powerful state that you want to be. So I think, in my opinion, there's always a balance. If your symptoms are not very severe, if you not have high genetic risk factors, try the natural approach first. See what happens. And then drugs are always there to support us when we can't, cope in any other ways.
I love what you just touched on, which is the sort of empowerment of going through this chapter of life as well. And I think it's something that we haven't spoken about at all on the panel yet. And I don't think it's something that is really acknowledged much in sort of even mainstream media. There is a real benefit to sort of menopausal sort of years as well. And, what I think exactly what you touched on, we can really gain in sort of confidence and I suppose sort of ability in a way as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love Dr. Lara Brydon. Maybe some of you have read her book, Hormone Repair Manual. She's amazing. She's based in New Zealand. So she's very close to indigenous cultures of Australia and New Zealand. And what she's saying that women, those cultures, they don't have any menopausal symptoms. They kind of sail through it. And this,
why is that?
What we need to do, we just need to analyze how they live, right?
Yeah.
So for me, there are a few very important factors. First, they eat whole foods, so which means kind of no processed stuff, and so on. Then they move. Right, so we talked about exercise. It's great for muscle tone, it's great for stress, it helps you burn extra calories. So on so many levels, movement is very much need to be incorporated into menopausal period. Then they're kind of connected to nature, right? So they're very intuitive. They might walk barefoot, earthing. It kind of offsets this excess radiation, helps with inflammation in the body. They're not chronically stressed, so they might be stressed, and I'm not an expert on endogenous society, but this is kind of my hypothesis, and also, of course, I've heard other experts speak about it. So they're not chronically stressed to the extent that they wake up and they've got these pins and needles, and they're consistent, and it's the chronic stress that creates problems. Occasional stress we need. It's the way to protect our life, is the way to help us cope with kind of dangerous situations. The chronic stress shuts down your hormonal system, shuts down your digestive system. So it's responsible for 1,500 reactions in the body. Most of them are not kind of beneficial for us. And I guess one last point is that they're spiritual, right? So, mental, emotional health, so important. Yeah. So they're kind of connected. And I mean, good luck to all of us trying to live like that in central London. However, we can incorporate some of those elements, absolutely.
Because on the flip side, things like poor diet, like drinking, like stress, they can obviously, can they enhance menopausal symptoms? Can they worsen them?
Absolutely. So alcohol, unfortunately, I love a glass of wine. Galyna knows.
Me too. We are fans, yes.
And that's actually the hardest one for me to kick. But alcohol, women who do give up, their hot flushes can go. Alcohol alone can be responsible for some of those uncomfortable symptoms. And I started talking about. You're not there yet. You can have
after
a few
breakfast.
glasses.
You can have one.
So I started talking about this perimenopause and what changes. So first, actually, it's how progesterone goes. It drops around kind of 45 for different people, and then that's responsible for some of the mood changes. So we become more irritable and so on. And then what happens with estrogen? Estrogen actually spikes. And I'm actually an example of that. So my periods are now shorter and I bleed much more. And unfortunately, I have some genetic SNPs. That means that I'm converting testosterone much faster into estrogen, and also I can't clear estrogen as well. And so what that means, that it hits me super hard with heavy bleeds and also kind of shorter periods, which means that I'm kind of becoming anemic, very significantly so. And so what happens with other women can be other symptoms, but in my case, what I need to do, not only, before I was managing, I had endometriosis all my life. I was managing it very nicely with herbs and diet, virtually no symptoms. Now I need to invest much more. I need to really take my herbs. I need to be very careful. Now that my energy is low because of my iron, I need to be very careful that I don't have other problems with energy production. So, of course, stress depletes, our adrenal function, which is responsible for our energy. So I need to look after all other pillars of my well-being in order to kind of manage this, significant imbalance that is kind of growing. And that's what we need. That's why it's so important to look after yourselves during this time, because whatever imbalance you have, it will unfortunately get magnified during your perimenopause, menopause. And then, then you need to make sure that other elements support that imbalance and counteract that imbalance. And unfortunately, in my case, actually, alcohol, it impairs processing of estrogens, which means that actually kind of cancer risk goes up.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, in my case, alcohol is really misaligned with this period in my life, and I'm not there yet. I'm working on it, and
this is not what anyone wants to hear. But they have to give up wine.
Yeah, look, I'm not a natural. Well, my herbal tinctures, you can try them a little later. They're alcohol based, so as a herbalist, I will never be completely zero.
Can I ask, as a herbalist, as a naturopath, as a homeopath, what are the things that you can do? How do you work with clients then to bring them back into that sort of balanced state?
So, so first of all, when we speak to what happens to the body, we have estrogen drop, and our ovaries stop producing there's almost nothing produced by our ovaries post-menopause. And that function actually switches to our adrenals, and then to an extent to the fatty tissue. Well, actually not to an extent, to a large extent. That's why actually it's not a good idea to be too skinny during menopause, because it's our adipose tissue which is responsible for takes over estrogen production.
Yeah.
So we do actually need, so it's kind of the way nature is looking after us. So we all kind of a little bit
That's a really interesting way of looking at it.
upset about our extra fat.
We should
but
celebrate
we
it.
actually need, we should celebrate. We say you don't necessarily need to celebrate menopause, but you need to honor it.
Yeah.
So speaking of herbs, so first we need to replace the loss of estrogen, right? And there are phytoestrogenic herbs. There are also phytoestrogenic foods like soy, for example, or flax seeds. But in the herbal realm, we've got our black cohosh. So black cohosh is number one. In Latin, it's called semicifuga. It's just over there. And
do we have herbs on the table?
So I think maybe after the event you can all try a little bit of them, the ones that I mentioned. Just put a little bit on a teaspoon. Don't drink it. It is medicine after all. So
what do
and it's 25% alcohol.
What do the phytoestrogens do? Do they replicate estrogen?
Yeah. So they bind to receptors. So there are phytoestrogens, and there are herbs called steroidal saponins, which have estrogen-like effect, which means they all bind to estrogen receptors, and they kind of have this.
There goes the tincture.
No, it's fine. That's fine. They have the estrogenic effect on our body. It's much weaker, of course, than hormones in hormone replacement therapy, but they do perform some of that role. And by the way, they also help with estrogen excess if you have that kind of issue, perimenopause.
So these phytoestrogens, you can take them as a tincture, you can take them as a tea?
Yeah, so I've prepared a tea as well as a tincture. So the tea has red clover, which is also a phytoestrogen, and it also protects from the risk of estrogen dominant cancers, so like breast cancer.
Yeah.
So it's a lovely herb to taste. I didn't include anything kind of disgusting in your formula, but there are some herbs that even I wouldn't take. Anyway, and then we've got sage. Sage is good not just for hot flushes, but also for kind of sweating during hot flushes, and it helps us concentration. So a lot of these herbs, they hit quite a few symptoms of menopause. Semicifuga or black cohosh will help with vaginal dryness, with sweats, with migraines. Red clover will help with also vaginal dryness and hot flushes, but also kind of sweating, and it will improve memory and concentration. It's a digestive herb, which means that it will stimulate production of digestive juices, which is so important to metabolize the medicine that you're taking. And herbs, by the way, they are understood by our bodies food, so that's why they can be, sometimes I'm shocked because they can be more effective than even pharmaceutical drugs because they are assimilated so quickly. And also, of course, we have less side effects because the nature kind of intended herbs for us to use in that way. And then I've got chamomile in that tea. So in the tea, you usually use loose leaves, and you need to infuse over 10 minutes or even overnight to make the most out of these herbs. A lot of other herbs, like I mentioned, black cohosh, they're roots. So roots, you need to decoct it. It's a little bit fiddly, you need to boil it and so on. That's why I love tincture form of herbs, because alcohol is an excellent carrier. It literally never goes out of date. It absorbs very quickly into the bloodstream, so acts a bit faster. So it's good on so many different levels.
And where does diet fit in? So this is obviously sort of ticking the tea in the tincture box, but do you sort of prescribe different diets for sort of patients experiencing menopause?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would start with putting patients on a clean diet, because first we need to remove everything that kind of interferes with the healthy functioning of the body, and these are mainly kind of processed foods, so all of the toxins, right? Our environment can be toxic. I used to be very polite. In my culture, we don't wear shoes in the house, and I used to be polite. People came to my house, it's like, yeah, you can wear shoes. I don't do it anymore. There's so many toxins in the streets, from construction, from everything that we kind of bring in our house. There are artificial fragrances, dry cleaner. We have so much in our environment that actually interferes with a lot of metabolic functions. There are actually these, estrogens that come from plastic that pose cancer risk and kind of push the imbalance even further. So first you need to make your diet quite clean. Then, we discussed that estrogen actually makes you a little bit more resistant to insulin and poses risk of diabetes, so the drop in estrogen. So you need really to look at low glycemic index foods. So if we're talking, well, of course, no processed sugars. When you eat fruit, berries have relatively low glycemic index. If I talk about natural sugars, so honey has a glycemic index of 50. We can drop to about 15 for agave syrup, although it's a little bit processed, I'm not a fan, but there is xylitol and some other ones there. Then if we want to go right down, we've got our yacon syrup, which I absolutely love. It's so tasty. Yacon.
What is that?
So it's a root from South America. It's actually a superfood. It's full of minerals and vitamins, and actually we can't really absorb it that well. So it's beautiful. It's a sugar. It's a little bit like honey consistency-wise. So you can make your cakes and whatnot.
What about something like stevia?
So stevia also is zero. So yacon and stevia, they're the same. So diabetics can take it easily. I just don't like stevia. It has an aftertaste. Yeah. So for me, yacon is kind of a preferred way.
Okay. And what other sort of therapies? I mean, you have so many things under one roof here at Cloud 12, but are there any other sort of alternative medicines, any therapies that you feel can really help women sort of manage that sort of menopausal window?
Yeah, so, in addition to what we mentioned, stress management is number one. It will spike also your glucose levels, and it will affect your cardiovascular. So whatever you do, yoga, meditation, for some people it can be just a nice aromatic bath. So when I work with my clients, some of them have very busy minds and they can't meditate. So we kind of find a way of mindfulness exercises that are suited for them. For some of them it can be just foreign bathing, which is a little bit different to going for a walk.
Forest bathing.
I feel
like this has become very trendy. It's sort of walking through a forest.
Well, I lived in Japan for a long time, so it's actually a little bit different to maybe what we think. Yeah. It's not like going for a walk with your husband discussing future house renovation. It's actually hardly talking. It's absorbing all of the smells around you. It's appreciating the energy of the plants, you know, the smells, the sounds,
like really tuning
being
into the
really
experience.
present in the moment, and if you can buy food that has an added benefit. So things like, there's so many different things of mindfulness, the practices that you can explore. Also breathing. So there is paced breathing exercises.
Paced breathing?
Yeah. That seem to work for menopause as an adjacent therapy. So what you need to do, you need to breathe diaphragmatically, so with your kind of belly, to get more oxygen in. You need to slow your breath, which would mean kind of one breath per 10 seconds or so, and you need to exhale longer than you inhale. So you can just Google kind of a few YouTube videos.
It's very calming, that type of breath.
It is
It's
very
good
calming.
for anxiety as well.
Because of course, yes, we do have palpitations. And by the way, there are herbs for pretty much I've kind of created a list. I had 20 herbs to put in a formula. I narrowed it down to 7. But there are herbs for preventing osteoporosis, for dealing with anxiety, for supporting adrenal function, which are adaptogens, for dealing with weight loss, for managing sugar. And there is, a herb called Jenya, which people in India use instead of insulin, for example. And also it curbs your sugar cravings. So it's kind of a win-win. So then there's hypnosis. You can do even self-hypnosis. Imagine yourself in a safe space, in a very cooling space, somewhere in Arctica or Antarctica. So there are some studies that actually say that hypnosis works quite nicely. There is acupuncture, which basically rebalances most of your systems, and of course good for stress and anxiety. To a limited extent, kind of sweating. Yeah, so there's a lot, and it really should be. So out of my 20 herbs, it's very difficult to create this generic formula which will suit everyone, because as I said, your kind of own medical history would matter the most in your perimenopausal, menopausal. And so, with diet and lifestyle, you also kind of need to really, in naturopathy, we always customize to a person.
I think that's really important, and thank you very much, because that was so eye-opening, everything that you had to say, and a lot of stuff that I didn't know about herbs as well. But I think you're exactly right. You do have to be very bespoke in your approach, and I think that's something that all three of you actually touched upon. there is no sort of cookie cutter approach, I think, when we're dealing with menopause, when we're dealing with hormonal imbalance. Every way that you work has to be so finely tuned to the patient. And that very much wraps up our discussion this morning, so I hope you all found it really helpful. I mean, as I said, I learned a huge amount from these wonderful ladies, and I think what I found so fascinating really was how sort of forward-thinking and modern all of your approaches are, and I think that's really critical, actually. We have to be looking ahead and forging forward, and always looking at the sort of new, sort of innovative practices to really address these symptoms, and hopefully that's what addresses the stigma and takes away the any shame that can be associated with this chapter of life. As Jenya said, I think it's fine, not one to celebrate, but what did you say? To honour. And I think that's a really lovely way to sort of wrap today up. If any of you do need to head off, we have goodie bags for you to scoop up on your way out. We do have time for any audience questions, so I don't know if anyone... Oh, sorry, Jenya, you wanted to say something?
Sorry, I just wanted to mention one thing. We've created, and I think we've included into your goodie bags, a menopause support program, and there is some information on the table. So essentially this program will include 3 months of support naturopathically, also a consultation with a hypnotherapist, a treatment in the spa. So for the first 5 people who book, we've got this collagen boosting high-tech facial, which is absolutely incredible. There will be a session with the acupuncturist and a reflexologist.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
There will be herbs included, diet guides. So it is a process. In naturopathy, it is a marathon, not a sprint. So you do need to invest 3 months of your life, maybe longer, and you kind of need a little bit of hand-holding, because you can't really solve all of the issues at once. The layers will come like an onion, and that's why also, I always include homeopathy in that, because if past trauma is present, it will be affecting. I literally have patients that all of their symptoms started from trauma that they experienced 20 years ago. And in those cases, I can give them anything in the world. If that trauma is still there, it would be very difficult to make progress. So homeopathy is really great to sort of go into that. So
the 3 month window is interesting, so I think that probably applies to all of your approaches.
Yeah.
Actually, none of these things are going to get results overnight, and I think that's
Exactly.
something we have to bear in mind. These things are a journey, a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's a very comprehensive 3 months program. You've got amazing bonuses and gifts.
So don't forget a goodie bag.
Yes, don't forget the goodie bag, and open to questions.
Oh, and sorry, I think is there a raffle as well?
Oh yes, there is a raffle as well.
Sign
So
language.
we've got Zoe from AcuPips, who very generously donated a set of, or maybe do you want to explain a little bit?
Everyone. I love being put on the spot. I am a traditional Chinese medicine acupuncturist, and I have an ear-seed business called AcuPips, and it's auricular therapy. So it's like reflexology, but we use it for years. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of ear-seeds before. So I've given Jenya a pack for one of you to take away. It's my new protocols. There's 12 in there. About 9 are really good for anybody experiencing perimenopause or menopause. I would avoid the fertility one. That's just in there. But they come with there's 40 crystal ear seeds in that packet as well with full instructions. So if you have a migraine one day, you can just use the instructions to put the ear seeds in your ears, or the stress and anxiety, there's digestion, there's loads of different ones. So
Amazing. Thank you so much. So generous. I want those as well.
You want me to do it? Okay. I know, I can't
So you've put everyone's
see
names
without
on
my
there.
glasses. So, yes, we've put everyone's name.
Did my name go in? I wasn't invited.
Noor Hussain.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. They're absolutely beautiful as well.
You're welcome. And so were there any questions in the audience? I saw one hand go up at the front somewhere. Andy?
Yeah, I'd like to ask if any of you have found with any of your clients a link with IVF and issues with the menopause at all? Or has it created an earlier menopause because of the hormone levels?
So here, do you want to start?
Yeah, so it's not a scientific study, but yes, I do generally see women who've had multiple rounds of IVF or egg freezing tend to sometimes have earlier menopause symptoms, maybe in their 40s onwards. That's something I've noticed, and I think it would make sense because of the high dose of hormones that people have to take for that process. But the good news is we still get really great results with them, so it's not a barrier to treatment at all.
In my experience, mothers or women who've gone through IVF are very more in tune with their bodies. So they're actually listening to their bodies. So they will come and tell you, this is what I'm feeling. That process of IVF has tuned them or mentally changed them into listening to the response. Because one of the things, I think, the specialists who were prescribing them IVF were asking them. And it's quite an interesting position when woman is being asked, how are you?
Yes.
Or how is your hormones? Or how is your mood? Are you sleeping well? So it's a very interesting.
We probably log it we're so much more aware of it as a result.
Yeah, I found the same. I had 7 cycles of IVF and had a menopause 9 years ago at 45, so I had to deal with all of that, but I was tracking it, making a diary, so it actually made the whole thing a lot easier as well.
That's really good.
Yeah, self-awareness is key,
Yeah.
and IVF puts you in a very self-awareness position when it comes to hormones. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise.
Jenya, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, so obviously hormonal overstimulation would put pressure on the liver. So liver is our main balancing organ for hormones and super important during menopause. So it becomes a little bit harder for the liver to balance things because it just has to deal with a lot of drugs. Having said that, if you support your liver with regular detoxification, betas are great. So betas kind of stimulate bile production, drench the liver. Betas also cooling for the body. So in our foods we've got rocket, dandelion leaves, chicory, and then there are beta herbs as well. So proper support of your detox channels kind of will help with recovering after these treatments and preparing for menopause better.
Hopefully that was helpful. Was there another question? Yes, lady next door.
As a society, we're
kind of having children later in life. So that gap then between the hormone changes in pregnancy and having children and then menopause, is that having an impact on the menopause and what we experience?
So what do you think? I suppose because that gap is becoming sort of shorter sort of for us to...
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the way we live our lives is very different to, the ages people used to get married or have children and things like that. And of course it's great we have more choice as women, but I think it does have an impact on menopause. But again, I think one of the really great things is that there's so much more available now. I think that I do see a lot of women who come in and they're like, my kids are 4 and I cannot look after 4-year-olds and go through menopause at the same time. But you don't have to anymore. I think that's the great thing. We can open up conversations, and whether you choose to go down the naturopathic route or whether you choose to take hormones, there's so much more available out there. So even though these are real concerns, and I think especially for maybe women who are in their 40s thinking about having kids now, and then they're like, oh no, we're going to have to go through menopause in a few years. The good news is if we know these things in advance and you're planning ahead, there's still room to be able to do those things, and it shouldn't be a factor maybe to put you off. I think it's good to know what's out there.
And it goes back to that self-awareness that Galyna sort of mentioned in the last question as well, I think, doesn't it? Sort of having that sort of very astute awareness of what your body is going through and being very mindful of what you're planning, I suppose, as well.
I think it's a great question. I had my baby is 17 months, so I had a baby at 41 and I am 42 now, and I approached my gynecologist with a concern that my perimenopause was going so dramatically, and apparently, I don't know how, but I'm still firing, so I'm not there. But at the same time, my post-pregnancy hormonal disbalance was pretty much perimenopausal symptoms,
Really?
dot to dot. I also beware that also in this country, Mirena coil is quite a popular recommendation, and for 90% of women, it would be miracle, wouldn't it? I unfortunately was the 10%, and I had very adverse reactions to progesterone. So if you're noticing, listen to your body. And it was actually my patient on the bed who told me casually, I got to the point of feeling self-worthless, and I am a psychiatrist who's so in tune, you know me for how many years, so in tune with myself. And I was throwing marble coasters at my husband. I thought that was normal, right? And it wasn't until my patient on the bed told me, I'm a doctor, I know hormones, I know life. It was my patient who said, oh, I've had Mirena, it didn't agree with me, I was getting anxious. And I'm like, oh, thank you, you might have saved my life, because I had a very adverse reaction to progesterone. So I think if one thing you can bring from the whole awareness of menopause is awareness of you.
Yeah, exactly.
If nothing will be like your girlfriend's thing, menopause. You will have your own symptoms, you will have your own reactions, you will have your own fat dispositions, or you will have your own naturopath. Everything will be your own. But you're the only person who can guide us in helping. Because if you don't know yourself, how can we?
That's a very profound comment. Wow. Jenya, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it would be harder, right, bringing up a young child, 45 to 55, and for this reason, you basically need to make everything else in your life easier.
Yeah.
If you can, quit the job, slow down in every way you can. And actually, progesterone is not a bad option in perimenopause. It actually completely safe, and those who can tolerate the coil, I think they should.
90% will be magic.
Try and use every help they can in every possible way, but slowing down a little bit and having less of other responsibilities is what you would need to do.
And we just had a quick question for Jenya about sort of herbs that stimulate progesterone and how effective they are and what you've seen, because to me that seems like quite a good idea.
Yeah, so Vitex or Agnus castus is the herb that stimulates progesterone production. It's actually a magical herb. It's a hormone balancer, so it will work also with, it's phytoestrogenic, so if you have estrogen deficiency or excess, it will work on that, and then it will support progesterone. So it basically resets the button on your hormones. It acts on the pituitary gland. And actually scientists still don't understand exactly how it manages to do that, because it doesn't act in one direction. A lot of herbs are kind of balancing, so if they can upregulate or downregulate depending on what you need.
They go straight to the root of the sort of problem and fix it somehow.
Yeah, so to give you an example how phytoestrogens do that. So they do bind to estrogen receptors. So if you don't have enough estrogen, they will have this estrogenic effect on your body. But if you have too much estrogen, they will block more potent estrogen from coming in. So you will have kind of less estrogenic reaction in that case. So.
And do women sometimes substitute these herbal sort of phytoestrogens for things like HRT? Have you seen success with that? Or?
So I see women that kind of considering HRT, but they want to explore the option of managing it naturally before, because I think about maybe 30% of women have symptoms that are really uncomfortable, but I think way more women are on HRT than 30%. I think so once they're on HRT, that's kind of, they've decided to stay on that option, and I kind of see less of those patients. I see them for other things that happen to them. But they can be quite comfortable on HRT, so if they don't feel the need, I'm not going to push them to.
And the ones who come to you preventatively, do you find they don't need HRT as much, or what's the
Yeah, actually, many of them don't. So of course they're going through this recalibration, which makes so many bodily functions uncomfortable. But it's not uncomfortable enough. Many of us can actually tolerate. So like puberty, right? Another thing about puberty, it passes. And we all need to remember that. If we only remembered that this time will pass, because when it hits us, we're like, oh my God, I will never sleep again. These anxiety attacks will never stop. My energy will never. So we assume this forever. It's actually not. It will pass. So it's like a teenager with pimples. They know that in 3 years' time they'll be beautiful and dating everyone, and they will get through this. And I think it's very important for women.
Same with menopause. You'll be beautiful. You'll be dating
everyone. Like your 70-year-old.
Exactly. But can I just say, you also touched on cleaner living, because obviously clean living is impossible, but cleaner living, and there was, I know you for a while now, and there was one thing that I heard you say about, it is little changes, isn't it, in your daily life. Since I've heard Jenya say that, I never ever have touched the printed receipt.
The receipt, don't touch that. It's full of xenoestrogens.
So I have never touched the printed receipt, momentarily printed receipt.
Yeah.
Don't touch freshly printed receipt.
What a great tip.
Yeah.
I'm also not going to allow anyone into my house wearing shoes ever again.
Please don't.
That makes me really queasy.
Look at BPA exposures. So it's not just our plastics, it also cans. Also, there's a lot of hidden, there's a lot of hidden plastics. So if you buy any, let's say, pre-made soup, it means it's been made in a factory, it was hot, it was going through plastic pipes. So even if it's in a reasonable container, there's this hidden. I had like an absolute meltdown when I was researching it, and then I opened my coffee machine, and all of the parts are plastic.
Yeah.
Now my husband will never let me touch the coffee machine, so it's staying. But I have a very green dry cleaner. I use
small changes.
Yeah, all that. We can't do it all. It's a process always.
But it's always the case that small incremental changes can add up over time to have a really big significant effect.
Exactly.
So I think that's a good
Yeah.
point. Are there any other questions? from
Lena,
you?
I think.
I've got one. Obviously, I just turned 50, and perimenopause is like truly the devil. However, what I wanted to ask, really sorry I missed your part, because I'm a patient of Jenya's, and she's helped me tremendously. I have to say. So guys, I'm not selling you.
She's planted.
With HRT, I know a lot of women who in perimenopause who are still miserable. What percentage of do you believe that in the perimenopause HRT can really help? It's obviously your hormones are like this, right, the whole time. How do you know that one day you might need that progesterone or estrogen, and you could be great for a week, and then the second week when that drops, you're like completely mental again?
Yeah.
So I decided to listen to Jenya and come off SSRIs that was put on by my doctors, and get, and literally, which was the most horrendous thing, and do the herbs. Because I just felt like, until I'm truly in the menopause, how can HRT really help me? I mean, that's the question I have for you. And what percentage of women are really truly being supported by HRT, that are in the perimenopause and their hormones are fluctuating the whole time?
So Dr.
Yeah, so that's a great question and really valid, and everything you said, I do completely understand where you're coming from. I think one of the great things is more doctors are prescribing hormones, which is great. But one of the things that isn't so great is that not all doctors have the experience prescribing hormones. And if you go to see someone who isn't an experienced practitioner, they're just going to go, just take more estrogen, or just take more of this, take more of that. Oh, let's never check your levels. And that's where you run into problems. And that's where people get frustrated and they actually feel worse on hormones. One of my ethos is start low, go slow. I think that's really important. I think exactly what we've been saying about getting in tune with what's going on in your body is essential, because I need you to tell me how you're feeling so that I can help you with the hormone treatment. But I have patients now who say to me, so I didn't bother you, but I wasn't feeling great for a couple of weeks, so I just upped the estrogen for 2 weeks, and then I was fine, and then I dropped it back down to what I was doing. That's fine, isn't it? And I'm like, that is actually
so people
fine.
are sort of tinkering with their own...
Yeah, because they're so in tune with their system now, because we've worked together for a number of years, and they know exactly what they're doing. But you're right, there is a lot of hormonal fluctuations. I think, for me, one of my biggest problems is that people get put on far too much estrogen, I believe, in the perimenopause, because exactly like you said, Jenya, and I think you said as well, you get a surge in estrogen. So if you're just giving someone more and more estrogen, they're going to feel worse and worse. Progesterone is really important. There's a difference between what's in the Mirena and what's bio or body identical. And progesterone is not a commonly prescribed hormone in the perimenopause with most doctors. Testosterone is also really important. That does fluctuate, but not as greatly as the progesterone and the estrogen. So I generally find if you can get a good base of progesterone and testosterone, and maybe some other hormones like DHEA, which actually help to balance the hormone production as well as helping with your energy and get up and go, then things can be a lot smoother.
So not to demonise body identical hormones,
No,
but when you're saying things like people are being prescribed too much estrogen, is that because they are on the synthetic form where the dosage is contained?
No, not at all. I think that sometimes, like I said, it's great more doctors are learning about menopause, but their go-to hormone's estrogen. And for me, estrogen is super important, as we've all said today, but progesterone and testosterone are as important. And if you can get a stable base there, then estrogen can be used in moderation in the perimenopause. Because if you're bleeding regularly, you're making a ton of estrogen already. We could just be making everything worse by giving you more and more. And I've seen women come in on 6 to 9 pumps of estrogel, which... Well, I mean, look, it's not working if you're on 6 to 9 pumps. I'm just going to tell you that one there. So, it's all about knowing how to manage the different symptoms as well, and not just going, more is better. More isn't always better. Sometimes we need to reduce things lower. Sometimes we do need to look at alternatives.
I think from a medical perspective, and I'm sure somebody who worked for the NHS, the response of the NHS is usually, for a very long time, maybe decades, women were misdiagnosed. Thyroid, depression, anything else apart from menopause. We will now go into the opposite, and women will present with symptoms and they will be automatically tick boxed as menopause. So I think this is something to be aware of, that you are not just given hormones when there are underlying medical concerns, or the opposite, that you have truly symptoms of menopause, but they're starting searching for medical issues. So it will take time to settle. And that's my personal view, because I have worked in the NHS and I know what a tick box exercise is.
And one of the common things I heard as well was that a lot of women are going in presenting with menopausal symptoms, but actually being misdiagnosed with things like depression and being put on antidepressants.
Yeah, very common.
Yeah, and I think that's where you want to see a practitioner who understands all aspects of it. Because sometimes I will prescribe an antidepressant if somebody needs it. I will sometimes say, maybe we don't go down the hormonal route. Maybe this isn't the right route for you at this moment in time. Maybe we want more supplements, or maybe we need to focus on another aspect of your health first before diving into hormones. But yes, I do prescribe a lot of hormones as well. But I think you want to see someone where it's not their only go-to, where they have sort of the breadth of knowledge to go, maybe this isn't for you, maybe this is for you.
I think, like you said, going to a specialist, and I think people are becoming more and more specialised in their avenue of healthcare now, and that's important.
What Jenya was talking about, holistic therapies, alternative therapies, combination treatments, that is all key. There won't be a single button that you press.
Definitely.
Yeah. Just to add to kind of progesterone discussion, progesterone has a balancing effect on estrogen. So when it drops first, that's where kind of estrogen goes crazy, and it's very much needed in this whole balancing act. So what Dr. Sohère said, just doing estrogen alone, might have this kind of roller coaster and not very beneficial effect.
Well, all three of those hormones need to be in a sort of nice symphony all together, don't they? There's not sort of just any one that should be addressed by itself.
Yeah.
Is there another question somewhere? Lady over there.
You mentioned the 45 to 55 that you have to do. Okay. What about the over 55? Is it too late to something?
Never too late. Was that for Jenya, I think, that question? So the 45 to 55, wasn't it?
I would say it's never too late, but it's what you've invested between 45 and 55. That's what will have a bearing on your 55 and after. But, of course, it's never too late.
So perhaps if you get to sort of 55 and above and you didn't invest at 45 to 55, you just have to invest a little bit more.
Yeah, a little bit more. You need to work a little bit harder. But it's actually once you've gone through this change, you will be stronger. You actually will have more vitality to deal with stuff. So it's actually also a good period to work on yourself.
It's the next chapter to embrace.
Yeah.
Is that a lady over here?
I would love to ask, I think Dr. Galyna mentioned it, and I'd love to put a little bit more light on the subject. Progesterone, too much progesterone in the body the body doesn't need to accept it, or sometimes doesn't accept it, or doesn't agree with the body, giving a bit more of the side effects. What's the alternative? What do we do? Do we lower it? Do we change it? Can we have a little bit more on that?
Yeah, of course. So we're talking about the Mirena coil, and the Mirena coil has synthetic progestin that's released. It's not bio or body identical. So like you said, a lot of women, it's absolutely fantastic for them and it works really well. But some women, they don't agree with it.
Small percentage.
Yeah. However, even with bio or body identical progesterone, I do see patients where their body just isn't accepting it, like you said. It's not working well for them. A woman I saw last week, in fact. And what we're going to do together is look at, would a different dose work for her? Would a different format work for her? So maybe not oral, but maybe taken in a different way. Would we be better off cycling it? So she only has to take it, say, every 3 months or so. The recommended dosage for progesterone is 100 milligrams orally every day. Now, not all women can tolerate that, which is why sometimes people come to see me, because I will work with them to try and alter the dosage, the format. The important thing for progesterone is that it's also there to protect the lining of the womb. So if you have a womb, we're going to work together to have more regular ultrasounds of the womb and ovary so that you feel good, but we make sure we're not doing any harm to the body. So there are alternatives out there.
How do you know if you're not tolerating it? Is it very obvious?
If you throw in marble at your husband, just saying. I mean, it depends on the husband. Mine is all right,
Will it just be exacerbated symptoms?
Yeah, there's quite often people feel worsening of mood or irritation.
Anxiety, palpitation. You can't put your finger on it, but everything annoys you. Everything annoys you. But that's important. You don't know what annoys you. So that's, I think, not being able to put a finger on it. Panic attacks. That happened to me, I was having full-on panic attacks, and as a psychiatrist, luckily I was able to self-contain it and self-manage it. But it is a quite a scary. Frequent panic attacks are quite scary, and when you move on from what is it, blunt object to a sharp object, you got it. Sorry.
If I can just add on progestins, which Dr. Sohère, you can also comment. So we need to talk a little bit about risks of HRT, right? So there were cancer risks that have been mentioned for the last 20 years, and when the paper came out, so the most of the risks are actually connected to progestins, which is this unnatural synthetic progesterone. Everything else is pretty safe these days. So when you are choosing kind of what drug to use, read the research, because some of them do pose health risks and others don't. And Dr. Sohère obviously will be an expert to shed more light on that.
Yeah, can you explain a bit more about the risks?
Yeah, so
we can touch on that.
Most GPs have moved on from prescribing synthetic progestin. The body identical progesterone is far more favourable now. In terms of risks, estrogen through the skin is favourable, so that's why most estrogens you get from your GP is either patch or a gel these days. If you're under 50, you can take oral estrogen, but then I was thinking, well, if you're going to have to switch at 50, why don't you just start on the right thing and not have to go through the transition of changing things? But the risk with the current types of HRT in terms of breast cancer is around about for a woman who's not taking any HRT, the risk of breast cancer is around 24 per 1,000. And if you take HRT, that risk increases by 4. So, so it's a small risk. Not if you're one of those 4, of course, but, it's a much smaller risk than women were led to believe for all those years. And like you said, most of the risk was with synthetic. Now, if you drink 4 glasses of wine a week or more, your risk also goes up by 4. Wow. So it's an equal risk there.
Which is all of us, right?
I've heard actually it's even higher.
Even higher.
Alcohol poses higher risk for cancer than HRT.
I think it depends how much you drink.
The statistic made me cry. Well, even like a glass of wine, because it impairs the liver.
And then, like you said, the flip side is obviously sort of raised rates of cardiovascular disease, osteoporosis, dementia. So I think you have to find your sort of happy medium, don't you? There's always a sort of compromise in some way.
Definitely. And I think that's why it's also good to talk about it with your practitioner. I would never say to somebody, oh, there's no risk of breast cancer, just crack on, sort of explain there are some risks, they're small. Let's talk about your personal history. Is there breast cancer in your family?
That's so true.
And yourself personally in the past and things like that. I've got women who have had breast cancer who are on HRT. Sometimes we change the way they take it, lower the doses, and do things like that. So it's good to give people options.
It's that power of a bespoke approach again.
Definitely, yeah. But I think what Jenya is saying about lifestyle is so important, because actually obesity doubles your risk of breast cancer. So, that's again, we're coming back to the lifestyle, going, okay, I want to take HRT or not. But, if you say you want to take it, go, well, what else can I make changes in my lifestyle that I'm minimizing risks overall? And, of course, obesity is going to affect your bone density and your heart health and your brain health as well. So it's just really looking at things from that holistic point of view.
All of these things are so connected, aren't they?
Definitely.
It's why you have to be so 360 in your approach.
Yeah.
Was there another question somewhere at the back?
Lena, did you?
Yes, lady at the back.
I just think that why would anyone prescribe some progesterone to you that put you in such a terrible state? And I don't understand that.
It was Mirena coil, which is a contraceptive.
I mean, like, to me,
And
that's just, it's like this.
But it is actually quite a common practice in this country to prescribe Mirena coil for especially later geriatric mother, I think we're still called in the maternal on the maternal ward. So if you are a later first-time mother, you almost automatically.
I mean, I was prescribed it as well, and I just rejected it because I did put it in when I had my son, and it was a disaster. But I just think that there's this whole kind of, I mean, there's just this. I just don't understand why it would be an option
But
for
once again,
women when they haven't been tested whether they need it or not.
No, it's a contraception measure, and I have to say again, I have to stress it again. 90% of women respond beautifully to that, and it actually delays symptoms of perimenopause and menopause, and even if you have symptoms, lowers it. So it does have a validity behind that decision.
But not all of these things are going to work for every single
Yeah.
person, so I
100%.
think we have to remember that.
100%.
Who's there? Sorry, lady in the red.
Hi. Could we please touch a little bit on the subject on the relationship between perimenopause, menopause, and become insulin resistant?
Sorry, what was that?
So is the relationship between perimenopause, menopause, and becoming insulin resistant?
Ah, yes, okay. So insulin resistance basically means that you are producing, your blood sugar is normal, but you're producing a lot of insulin to keep your blood sugar normal. Now, a lot of insulin in your bloodstream is not a good thing because it causes inflammation. And we know that inflammation is probably the root cause for most chronic illnesses. So you can do an insulin blood test, not with your GP. It's not something your GP will be able to do, so don't ask. But you can get that done to give you an idea of how much insulin you're producing to keep your blood sugar normal. And you can also check the blood sugar. There's a test called the HbA1c, which is the measure of 3 months of sugar that sticks to your red blood cells, so you can't just fast for a couple of days and get a normal blood sugar. Now,
Can't lie.
so insulin resistance, like I said, causes inflammation. And this inflammation will cause worsening of your menopausal or perimenopausal symptoms. So I think there are 2 blood tests that are really fantastic predictors of healthy aging. One is your insulin, and the other one is something called homocysteine. And homocysteine is a cardiac marker. It also gives you some idea about your genetics for a process called methylation, which is a really important process of processing your B vitamins in a certain way, which affects your hormones, your heart health, your antioxidants, your cancer risk, how you process vitamin D. I don't methylate very well at all, but I'm glad I know that because now there's things that I can do about it, and I'm very mindful of that and my breast cancer risk and even the sort of hormones I may take in the future. That's in my mind now, so I think it's a really useful thing to know. If you're insulin resistant, it is harder to lose weight. And again, we said that's another factor with perimenopause and menopause in terms of the weight gain.
And
so it's a really important starting point, really, to help regulate your insulin. It'll help with your weight loss. It'll help with your menopausal symptoms. And there are things you can do herbally. There are medications as well. And of course, the key thing is your lifestyle. So what can we change in your lifestyle to help improve that?
And from aesthetic perspective, chronic inflammation does cause you to age faster. So not only will you look older, but also internally your organs will be aging faster.
So anything you can do to reduce that inflammation. Jenya, do you have something
Yeah,
to say?
so just to add to that, essentially estrogen has this insulin sensitizing effect, so it makes us less insulin resistant. It helps absorb it and kind of use it in the right way. So when we lose estrogen, also what happens, the glucose that we use, to burn energy, we convert it a bit slower to the energy, and instead we switch to the tendency to store that glucose, because glucose in the body essentially converts into fat. So insulin helps with 2 things: kind of absorb it better and improve kind of insulin resistance, but also it helps kind of burn glucose and use it in a better way rather than kind of storing it as fat. And also, I guess another role of insulin, it's made from cholesterol ultimately. So talking of cardiovascular risks, we might have kind of raised cholesterol, and that's why exercise is so amazing, because it will help us process cholesterol and it will also help us burn kind of glucose and excess fat in this way.
That's a really interesting question. Hopefully that was helpful. Is there a question? This lady here, the blonde lady.
Right at the start, you mentioned gut health, and I wondered if menopause has an impact on your gut health, the drug leash, what that does to your gut, and if there are ways that you can help that as well. Because none of the hormones replacement therapy seems to mention if it has any help in the gut health, or whether you need to take something in addition.
But what do you think, Sohère?
yeah, I would say that menopause has an effect on your gut health, and gut health has an effect on your menopause. So if your gut is already not in a good state, we were talking about the liver detoxifying, but your gut also helps you detoxify from the hormones, especially if you're going to take hormones. You know, you need to be able to detoxify from the things you're taking. So I think gut health is a very important thing there. And also, say if your gut isn't healthy, a lot of the foods we're talking about with the phytoestrogens, phytonutrients, they could then have a negative impact if your gut isn't healthy. And a lot of them go, well, no, hang on, I tried eating more whole foods and I really blew up, so I'm not going to do that because I'm getting more bloating. So gut health is an important place to start there as well. I think it's, when I see someone, it's kind of trying to figure out what is the most pressing issue for them at that moment. So if I can get someone feeling a bit better, and we go, okay, right, you feel a bit better because your hot flushes are gone, your mood's better, and you're sleeping better. Now, let's work on your gut health. Because like we said, none of this stuff is overnight. You know, it all takes a few months to work on at least. So we go, right, you're feeling a bit better. Now, do we have the energy to make some changes in the diet as well and work on the gut health? Maybe we need to treat some parasite, or SIBO is a huge thing that I see at the moment, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and you get a lot of upper abdominal bloating, and it's very classical that you start eating better and you blow up like you're pregnant.
Particularly like you say with those whole foods, with grains, with pulses, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we need to try and treat that underlying cause so that you can eat better, so you feel more comfortable, and you can also process your hormones better. So I think, you know, the two are definitely linked, and I think health is just so important these days, isn't it?
Agreed.
And from aesthetic point of view, the number of women who present when they think they can't, you know, oh, we couldn't do up our jeans, it's actually, it's not subcutaneous fat layer, it's bloating and weakness of the muscle. So they no longer can control abdominal recti as much, obviously because it has debulked, but also the control isn't there, the strength isn't there. So it's bloating and muscle weakness. It's actually not as much subcutaneous fat layer.
Just to add very quickly on gut health, so we discussed the liver that helps us process hormones and kind of removes the excess. Also, it's our colon, and if we're sluggish, if we're constipated, if things sit for days in our colon, we will reabsorb some of the estrogen back, which will kind of create this excess and unwanted excess. But when we talk to our gut health, it actually starts in our mouth. So we kind of need to look after every aspect of this canal. And you know, if our oral health is poor, we will have microbes, parasites, everything going down stream. Then we have our stomach. If we don't have enough digestive juices, such as hydrochloric acid, which is a barrier for pathogens. So when we're stressed, when we're not kind of eating mindfully, we just won't have those juices to, first of all, absorb all the good nutrients, but also prevent those kind of microbes from going through. Then we have our liver, which we can support, as we discussed, with betas, occasional detox. There's Shisandra, which is one of the most favored herb by Chinese emperors for vitality. It's the herb supercritical for liver. And then we've got our gut, which we can support with lots of fiber, fermented foods that have kind of natural probiotics. We can also have probiotic supplements. Yeah, so we need to kind of look at almost every section to make sure every cylinder is firing correctly.
Balance. This lady here.
Just a very quick one for Jenya. Is the tea that we drank the one that you were talking about?
Yeah, it's actually not. This one is what we normally offer. It's called beauty tea. So it does have actually herbs that are supportive for menopause. It does have red clover, which is our phytoestrogen. So it's got gotu-kola, which is #1 herb to stimulate collagen production. So for me, I don't have as many tools as Galyna, unfortunately, but I've got my gotu-kola, which is kind of a natural.
Nature. You have the whole nature.
There's calendula, which helps reduce inflammation, and also it's bitter, so stimulates liver cleansing. Bitters are cooling, if you remember, for hot flushes. Yeah, so they will tick a few boxes there.
Thank you.
Did I miss any questions? Are there any more hands up in the air that we missed? No. Okay. Well, that was a really engaging Q&A. I think probably the longest one we've ever had. So.
I loved it.
It's a great topic. We topped the charts. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. But firstly, a huge thank you to our amazing beauty triangle. I think definitely one of the most most inspiring conversations we've had in a while, and so interesting because I think all of you have such a valid and sort of forward-thinking approach to managing the menopause, which is what we're here to discuss. Thank you everyone for joining us this morning. I hope it was helpful. If you have any more questions, I'm sure our panellists will be here to chat a bit more, and come to more of our events. It would be amazing to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you.